Hi, thank you, Andrea. This is really a great pleasure to be here. Hello to everybody in the room and out there in Zoom land. Um, uh, Again, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Peter Herzog, and I work for Washington State Parks. And I'm joined by Reid Parker, who I'll ask to introduce himself as well here at the as he get into his section of this presentation. This is a really great opportunity for me and kind of an interesting and fun homecoming. I started with Washington State Parks years ago, and back in 1988, 87, one of my first assignments was a Marine Park Ranger up in the San Juan Marina area, working for some of my early mentors, Will Lorenz and Dave Castor, who some of you might remember from the good old days. To give you an idea of how long ago that was, buoys were free, and we had just started the Marine Mooring Pass, and my main job was helping to haul about 100 bags of garbage a day off of Jones Island and off of Suche Island, a number of different places, and thank God for pack it in, pack it out is all I can say. That made that job far better. And helped me convince me that I wanted a career in state parks. So one of my earliest memories also of rangering there is if you walk up the dock from dock number 1 in Fossil Bay, you come upon a sign that says Interclub of Washington, and lists a huge number of yacht clubs that all conspired and cooperated to purchase at least significant portions of Suche Island, and sort of got me used to the idea that there is not just stakeholders or park visitors coming to Suche Island and the marine park system, but a lot of people who put some blood, sweat, and tears into establishing the marine park system and making it what it is over time. And it was always a fun thing to know that you really didn't need to be doing a lot of patrolling or surveillance of what was going on in the islands, because there was a line of people at the dock when you showed up telling you exactly what was going on the islands as you know, the report from the prior evening's events came in. So it's really been a pleasure over the years working with now RBAW and the yacht clubs and working on the beautiful marine park system, which is really a one-of-a-kind system in the country, and something that I think we're all really proud of at state parks as well. We could move to the next slide, talk a little bit about what we're here to talk about. Next slide after that. All right, so as I mentioned, Reid Parker is here today. Reid is our marine maintenance manager for the entire marine system in Washington State Parks, and so he's going to be talking a little bit about our recent successes in our buoy program, and give you a little bit more of an overview of what the marine park management system is. I'm going to talk a little bit about future buoy planning efforts, as well as some questions about the remote buoy payment system. We have a floating restroom pilot out down in South Sound, and just a little bit more about Lake Bay. And it's been interesting to hear the presentations today about how all these things are connected. So I don't think I'm providing the only information today on these topics, and Reid as well, but we're all sort of building upon common themes here. So it's been an interesting thing to see that how aligned we are in what it is that we're working on. So with that, I'll hand it over to Reid, and Reid, if you could introduce yourself and then take it away.
All right, can you hear me? Everybody can hear me? Peter? Yeah?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. I'm Reid Parker. I'm the statewide marine facilities manager. I've been with Washington State Parks about 2 years. I come from lots of different agencies. I worked for a long time in Southeast Alaska, where I did a lot of boating. And so when I saw this job open up a couple of years ago, I was like, oh my God, that's a job. I want that job. I want to be out on the water in Puget Sound. And I'm really happy to be here. So if we can hit the next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about our statewide maintenance program. We call ourselves a marine crew in the marine program, but we work all over the state. We go to more than 70 parks throughout the state, doing maintenance on anything that floats. Docks, mooring floats, boat launches, ramps, buoys, swim lines, regulatory buoys, all that kind of work. Most of our work is, of course, in Puget Sound, but pretty much every lake that has a state park also has a floating thing that needs help. So that's our job. We have boats and heavy equipment. We have a crew of 3 folks besides myself who are out doing the work. And then we work with contracted divers throughout the state. Next slide, please. So mooring buoys, of course, really important. We have 259 mooring buoys throughout the Sound, all down Hood Canal, South Sound, all the way up into the San Juans. They're first come, first serve, 45 foot vessel limit. We do an annual topside. So it's in the 2 years that I've been here, we started, we were kind of behind the game with deferred maintenance. So we got Jen J from Orcas on board to do our diving and maintenance, inspecting our anchors and replacing all of our tackle. So all of our tackle on every buoy has been replaced over the last 2 years. This year, we finished that initial maintenance, and then we did a secondary maintenance of the work that was done in 2021. So now spring, summer of 2023, we'll be coming back and looking at that first half of buoys that we looked at in 2021. So every other year we look at the maintenance or look at the anchors and the whole line with the diver. And then the off years of low tide, we pull the buoy and the chain and the connection up onto the deck of our landing craft and inspect to make sure that nothing is amiss. So that's just basic mooring buoy maintenance. I think right now about 215 or 220 of our buoys are serviceable. We've had some cut. We have some anchors that have failed and need to be replaced or been dragged. So why are buoys important? Recreation public wants buoys. It's easy to get on a buoy. Of course, it's a lot easier for newer boaters. So we provide, it's safe access for the public. Also, we try to put buoys in more sensitive habitats where we don't want people to anchor. So buoys do help protect eelgrass and macroalgae from anchoring impacts, which hopefully, is improving habitat for salmon, which is improving orca conditions for orcas. If you have to anchor, I'm not sure who's familiar with what, but the deeper the water you can anchor in, the less impact you're going to have to eelgrass. If you go to a place like Echo Bay at Susha, we have a line of buoys at about 15 feet. If you anchor inshore from there, you're going to end up impacting that eelgrass habitat. And so anytime you're anchoring, you're not on a buoy, we ask you to, 30 feet or deeper so that you're out of the range of eelgrass. The center description here, or the center graphic, shows that some places like Mystery Bay out on the peninsula, they have shellfish protection zones. And so they would the folks there would prefer that you don't anchor there. You either use the mooring buoys or the dock space that's provided. And then this map, the graphic that shows the Puget Sound and all those little dots shows where eelgrass has been mapped, different species. And so it is dispersed kind of through all the shallow places where folks like to anchor. Next slide, please. So Peter's going to talk about kind of the phase 2 on this slide, but right now we're in the phase 1 for future buoy work, which is to permit replacement of anchors at our existing buoys. And some of our buoys have been dragged, some of them have rusted out and are not usable. So we're in the process of trying to permit to replace every buoy anchor that we have in our system, starting up in San Juan and Skagit counties, and then working down in the South Sound. And so the design and engineering is pretty simple. The permitting path has a lot of different steps, and we're in the kind of pre-permitting. We've talked to all the permitting agencies and we're working on our application materials. So we expect within the next 2 years to be able to start replacing anchors. The highest priority ones are where they're in the worst shape, or we have the highest use, and then working through our whole system. And then Peter will talk about that phase 2, optimizing our mooring configurations and expansions, or moving things around. But right now, it's easier for us to permit replacement of our existing than it is to permit in new places. So that's why we're working on that first. That's the highest priority to us. Next slide, please. And then just quick plug for our linear mooring systems. We've done a bunch of work over the last 2 summers to clean, inspect, replace a lot of the underwater components on the linear mooring systems. We have 2 at Echo Bay and Susha, and 2 at Stewart Island, 1 in Prevost Harbor, 1 in Reid Harbor. And those allow moorage for vessels greater than 45 feet, and allow for bigger groups, yacht club groups, to be able to be close together. Next slide. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about here before I hand it back to Peter is recent projects. These are more projects that have been done by our capital development team. The recent project that was completed is in our home bay at Cornet Bay at Deception Pass State Park. The public marina was in pretty sad shape, and so over last winter, I guess January of 2022 now, there's a huge project to replace the whole marina, new floats, new gangway. I think there's something like 40, 32-foot long floats in that moorage configuration. It's all accessible from shore, so it has really expanded capacity there, and replaced some floats that were in pretty poor condition. Some other projects that are in progress or coming up over the next couple of years that you'll see. Right now, Fort Casey boat launch they just started breaking ground on that project, I think this current week. So that's a FEMA funded project for a new boat launch and breakwater at Fort Casey, there by the Keystone Landing where the ferry goes over to Port Townsend. The next project coming up is at Stewart Island. The Reid Harbor moorage is going to be replaced and expanded. The floating islands are going to go away, but the moorage that's attached to shore will be quite a bit bigger, and is going to be reconfigured, make it more accessible for boats on both sides at any tide. Susha moorage, there's going to be I think is it dock 1, the older dock at Susha is in design for replacement, along with the Stewart Island Prevost moorage. Those are kind of lumped together, and then there will be a Susha pump out barge like this. The one you see on the bottom of the screen, that's the one from Reid Harbor. There will be kind of a matching one that should go into Susha at Fossil Bay, along with the moorage replacement. And then there's going to be new moorage dock and pilings at Penrose. The Bowman Bay Pier is also is in the final design stages for replacement. These are projects I think construction will be like 24, 25, somewhere in there. And then the Blake Island moorage replacement project the design they picked a preferred design, and I think it's going to the legislature now for approval to seek funding. And so the preferred alternative for Blake Island is to keep the same footprint, but to do some dredging and to realign the moorage floats so that there's additional space for moorage, but the size of things won't change at all. Yeah, and I'll hand it back to Peter, I think.
Reid, there was a question or a comment earlier about our buoys and the number of buoys that we have, that at the type that we have. That sort of puts you on the spot, but you have a count of what we're using as far as helical anchors and just concrete block anchors and so forth, and what that kind of looks like now?
I could pull it up, but while you're talking, I have the spreadsheet that has all the buoys on it. But I'll look at the question and address it at the next break. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we move to the next slide. Okay, so buoy planning, and so this is this has been something that has sort of dogged us at state parks for quite a long time. We've whenever we start talking about buoys, we have typically gone for boating facility program grants and received them and started planning projects to look at where we might put in additional buoys, and there's certainly lots of people who want that to happen. And then we invariably come up against the plethora of various regulatory entities that have some sort of say or interest in buoys and where they get put, and the effects of putting buoys in. And so to folks who are running marinas, this is probably no news, but this is a tremendous gauntlet of regulatory agencies that we work with. And so sort of another kudos to Reid and our permitting folks that have worked on just getting the existing anchors updated and maintained was quite a feat too from a regulatory standpoint to get the permission to do that. And so then as we shift now into thinking about putting in new anchors and new buoy systems and additional buoys where there are not ones now, we start thinking about all the different regulatory folks that we have to bring together. This sort of list shows are kind of the interests or the area of interest that each of these departments have, both at the state and federal level. What we found is that as you go through this process, there's not exact harmony amongst all of the regulations that you have to comply with, and they're not necessarily intended for a state park system or a network of buoys around marine parks. And so there's some conflicting internal requirements that make this a very, very difficult process. So as I've been in the biz now for quite some time in state government, I've had this idea about can we get all the people in the same room to start thinking about what a real cohesive and comprehensive look at buoy placement and configuration and management might look like. And I've gotten some positive responses from the folks in these regulatory agencies in doing this. And our intent now is to establish an interagency work group to start doing just that, looking at what all the different interests are and the regulatory regime, and how can we put that together in a way, make changes necessary to do something that makes the most sense in our mooring areas around state parks. Our intent really is to use a stewardship approach to doing this. Reid mentioned eelgrass. There's eelgrass, kelp. There's bedland issues around geoduck, and of course intertidal issues and shellfish issues. There's just all kinds of reasons why we shouldn't be putting in any new buoys, but there's really good reasons to put in buoys, namely the protection of some of those marine resources in a way that is far superior to just sort of random anchoring in our moorage areas. And so I think that at least the intent now is there to start looking at this. And our long-term goal then is to look at how each anchorage is configured and how we might better configure it to sort of optimize the recreational function that's needed there and the capacity, but also in the way that protects the marine resources and does the job of buoys and creates sort of an optimal configuration in each mooring area. And so that's why I call those state parks buoy master plans. Something like that is the ultimate goal, that we then have something that really is cohesive and comprehensive and answer to that question. The graphic here sort of describes the regulatory definitions of different areas, and boy, as soon as you start talking about water, and my background up to this point has been in the development side of state parks, and anytime you're touching the water, it becomes very complicated. Not only from a regulatory standpoint, but from an ownership standpoint, and how that all comes together to provide a public system for boating facilities, and it's a very complicated thing, but one I think that we're sort of really renewed effort to try to address this in a positive way. Okay, next slide. There was a question about remote buoy payment and reservations. Doug, thank you for that question. This is something that's been interesting for us. Again, I told you I started when buoys were free, and then I was there at the onslaught of when buoys first cost $5, and some of the hate and venom that we got as a result of that, and people being forced to go on shore to the Iron Ranger and put in their mooring fees, and what an inconvenience that was, and sometimes just outright difficulty in making that happen logistically. So so this remote buoy payment system is something that we piloted at where did we? I knew this would happen. I'm blanking on the
piloted at Gerald Cove. Yeah.
Gerald Cove. Yeah. And we've gotten a positive response. I think the boating community likes it. Again, everything costs money, so a $4.50 convenience fee may sound steep, but that sort of compares in some ways to our normal park campground reservations, which are each reservation for a park campsite is about $7.50. So it's that's sort of the technical costs of doing this. But then there's also the on-site management of all of this as well, and particularly if there's conflicts, that becomes a cost for state parks as well. Trying to make peace between folks who are thinking that they have the same buoy, and so this is something that I think has been really positive. Here are the rules that have been adapted for buoys, and if we can move to the next slide. And here's the list, which does not include Gerald Cove on it. So this is the hot off the press list of places where the buoy payment is now active, and just add Gerald Cove to that as well. So, and I think this is something you can also look on our state parks website to get this information as well. And I think we're updating that, but this is the most recent hot off the press list. And so we're proud of how this is functioning. And of course, most of this is all dependent on cell coverage. And so that's really been the thing that some of our folks have been working on, increasing our Wi-Fi coverage to our parks and other places so that the park staff can have this information as well. Now, in terms of reservations, again, I sort of mentioned that the reservations and fees for payment are pretty steep, and that the cost of on-site management of something like that is as well. I'll just say that we're in conversation about reservations for buoys and dock space. How that gets played out is going to be a fairly involved and complicated thing. One of the issues too, and particularly at our docks, is that of course you're all aware that we don't have individual slips for folks to come in and reserve, and that rafting is sort of the order of the day, and so managing something like that is particularly on the docks becomes quite labor intensive to make sure that that's all coming together properly. I think that as we are getting more into the higher numbers of people visiting and just sort of the crush and onslaught of public use that we're experiencing and we can expect in the future, I don't think we can get away from something like that in the future, but we have not tipped the balance in that direction just yet. But I think it's something that we'll be expecting in the future. Next slide. Floating restroom pilot. So this is, I know Bob Wise is probably looking at this as a new job opportunity to be a floating restroom pilot, but it's not. It's a pilot project, not a job. This is something that the state of Oregon has been working quite extensively on a series, particularly on their freshwater lakes, for floating restrooms. But this is something that we're testing using a boating facilities program grant at Cuts Island. So we received a grant to put in a floating restroom down there. If you've ever been down to Cuts Island on a summer afternoon, you know there's volleyball matches happening on the beach, and it's quite extensive amount of public use. And so sanitation has been a huge question about how to deal with that effectively there, and putting a ball toilet on a rock essentially is not really going to be something that works very well for us. So looking at a floating restroom kind of a situation that is pumped out similar to a sewage pump out station. This is something that, you know, we'll give it a shot, see how it works. We've just started the permitting process on that, and so I've mentioned how difficult and timely that time-consuming that can be. So we're expecting that this is probably a couple years out before we have something in place. But we're thinking that this is something that we'll try out, see how it works, and I think we'll be really interested in knowing from the boating community how it is working, if it's not working, and get real feedback about if this is something that we should apply in other places as well. Next slide. There was a couple of presenters now that have talked about Lake Bay Marina, and this is something that's this is an exciting opportunity. I think this is one of those the diamonds in the rough. I think that we all believe is something that is some destiny here that needs to happen. That this needs to be one of our newer opportunities for recreational boating. Also, with the establishment of the National Maritime Heritage Area, this was a mosquito fleet site, and there's some historic integrity here that still remains. There's still, this is a historical site, and it's important to our maritime history. And so this is something that's that is in a really tough condition at the moment, but with the cooperation of DNR and RBAW here, this looks like it's something that that could be rescued and saved and brought into a real public asset for the boating community. What's happening currently right now, the state parks participation in this is that we signed an MOU with RBAW, of course, and with the Department of Natural Resources Aquatics folks to participate in the planning process. What do we do with this site? What are some of the amenities that should be providing? What are the interpretive opportunities? What makes this a real public asset worth potentially then in the future, including as a state park or as a state park marine area? At this point, we're still in the planning process and participating in that. No real commitments have been made from state parks about being an eventual downstream owner or operator of the site. But that comes in the second MOU that we're going to be developing here shortly, which really decides and sort of makes a determination about what needs to happen here that will make it something that the State Parks and Recreation Commission will want to accept as a state park. And so that involves the condition of the facility, the business proposition, and is this going to be a long-term drain on the state park system in terms of our operating budgets? Is this have future capital requirements that are going to need to be funded, and just really understanding what the business proposition here is, and the more that this can be a revenue neutral kind of a thing for state parks, the more attractive, of course, it is going to be for our commission to want to take it on. So this is really going to be another significant step about how does this all come together to a point where all the downsides have been taken care of, and it's just upsides, and we can make that argument to our commission and see if they'll accept the long-term ownership of it. So I think for many of us, it's a argument worth having, and something that's quite an exciting proposition, because they're not making new things like this that we can then just create new state parks out of. So I think I might sort of betray my exuberance around this a little bit too much. Of course, we've got some decision making ahead of us, but it's an exciting opportunity. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to talk about pump outs real quick. I'm sure you guys have talked about pump outs a lot today. So just know that pumpoutwashington.org, I think they have an app here where you can download and you can find the closest pump out to you. And then if you go on their website, you can also get an adapter to be able to make for less messy pumping for your boat. You can get a free adapter that fits your boat. Next slide. Yeah, and there was a question in the chat about who to contact, and all that information is up to date. If anything is amiss in any of our state parks, our info center at the 360 number there, or the email is the best way to get information to us quickly, because those folks will find us wherever we are. And then to answer the question, okay, so you can go to the next slide. To answer the question about helical anchors versus blocks, we have 116 helical anchors in our system, and those are all at least 15 years old, and they're all due for replacement, as well as our block anchors. For our buoys, we're hoping to generally switch over to all helical where we can. Some places the substrate is too hard, and we'll be upsizing our block anchors where we can't replace with helicals. But we want to upsize because we do 45-foot boats have gotten bigger and heavier over the last 30 years, and we know that they do get drugged, and so we don't want them or dragged. We don't want our anchors dragging around. So as we replace anchors with helical anchors, we'll also be upsizing our block anchors. That's all I have. What questions do you have for Peter and I?
Any questions from the room? I think there was one question on the chat about how to report a problem with the buoy. Grabbed a note off your website. It gave an email address. Does that sound like the right?
Yep, that's perfect. Yep, exactly.
We have a question in the chat. Is there a way to find out which buoys will be repaired next?
No, we don't. We will send out a press release in the spring about where we're going to do our inspections. The issue with buoys, as you know, is that the conditions on the ground change faster than we know about them. So also for reserving buoys or moorage space, the challenge is that we'll go do a bunch of work on a mooring buoy field, and then the next day an anchor or a line might get cut. We were working on Gerald Cove. The story I have is, from a couple of years ago, we were replacing buoys in Gerald Cove. The next day we went to go replace a couple more, and while we were working there, a boat cut an anchor line from a buoy. And so the conditions just change so fast, and we're always trying to optimize where we can get the most bang for our buck. So we'll, when we know, hey, we're going to the South Sound to do all the buoys, we'll, get a press release out about that. But the rest of the info just changes too quickly to have our information be worthwhile in an up-to-date fashion.
All right, thank you, Reid.
One other question,
one other
from
question.
Gina Purdy.
Go ahead, Steve.
As you replace buoys, has there been any discussion of increasing the max LOA to accommodate larger boats?
We have talked about that. Peter and I have talked about that a little bit. We, at this point, we're still in the design phase for the new anchors. We haven't made a decision, I guess, say that. We had talked about, is 50 feet much bigger than 45 feet? How much was our weight class? We don't have a decision on that.
The boats are getting bigger. I think that to be consideration. Like a lot more larger boats on the water. They carry bigger anchors.
Yeah.
Reid, were we able to hear those comments from the room here?
Yeah, I heard everybody's got a bigger boat than they used to, and they're heavier, right? And yeah, for sure they are. They are getting, every boat is bigger than they used to be. My boat is 22 feet, but it's uncommon to have a little sailboat out there anymore. Everybody's got, 35 to 45 foot boats.
All right, well, we'll keep in touch with parks like we always do, and try to get the thoughts and the opinions of the recreational boater back to them. Thank you both.